Hello there and welcome back to another review. So today we're going to be having a look at the classic 1989 Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle that is Kickboxer. Now when I was younger, really young, I always used to get this film confused with Bloodsport. The film is very much in the same vein as that. I think this along with Bloodsport are sort of the two main classic Van Damme movies, aren't they? When you talk about sort of classic Van Damme, that really put him on the map in terms of movies he made in the 80s. I know Bloodsport, I think, was the first movie he made after No Retreat, No Surrender. The film also stars former kickboxing champion Dennis Alexio. Despite being made at the very end of the 80s, the film is about as 80s as you can get in Kickboxer. It's just 80s as it comes, you know, even though I say it's 89, but it's a real 80s movie, especially in terms of martial arts movies. Hong Kong movies not included, that is. I don't think the movie done overly well when released originally. Many calling it like a Karate Kid clone, and the plot, acting, violence, you name it. But over time, it's become a fan favourite of many Van Damme fans, and rightly so, because Kickboxer, a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure many of you out there remember watching it when you was little, or, you know, you grew up watching Van Damme movies. I did, and, you know, Kickboxer. And when I say I'm young, I'm talking like when I was either 6 or 7 years old, if they were on TV or something. I always used to sometimes, for whatever reason, get Kickboxer. Like if I was watching Bloodsport, for some reason I thought it was Kickboxer, or vice versa, that kind of thing. So you get a real simple revenge story, a guy that must train to avenge his brother, but rather than repeating what happened in Bloodsport, here the film plays much more like a kung fu movie, in that it's pretty much a training film. And if you recall, like my 36 Chamber of Shaolin, I love training movies, where it's not just fight, fight, fight. It is about this fighter, this individual going on a journey, learning martial arts, learning something new. And in very ways, it is like that, this film. It is sort of a kung fu movie in terms of the setup and the premise, and he must get revenge and he must train. Very much like a training film. Kurt Sloan in this movie has it all to learn. He's incredibly naive despite being a skilled fighter, whereas Frank Dux in Bloodsport is already skilled. We see him training when he is younger at the start of Bloodsport, but for the rest of the movie in Bloodsport, he is a skilled, seasoned fighter. I mean, you only need to look at the legacy of Kickboxer with some of the latter sequels to show how much of a fan base and audience this film has and had. Very much of the time, very 80s, very cheesy, very violent, and overall, to be honest, if you were like anywhere, as I mentioned, between sort of 10 and 15 years old at the time, you'd have absolutely loved this movie. I mean, I would have been 4 or 5 when this came out, and I must have saw it first when I was 6, 7, something around that time. But as I say, you'd have absolutely loved this movie. I think out of the two, when talking, I know there are other classic early Van Damme movies, Cyborg, etc. Lionheart, AWOL. But I think out of the two, if you're looking at Bloodsport and Kickboxer, I think I always leaned more towards Bloodsport. I think I was more of a Bloodsport guy. I think I watched that the most, which is that's a review for another time. But films like that and Kickboxer, you don't get so much anymore. Where it's cheesy, it's a bit cringy in places, but it's just so enjoyable at the same time. And it's just simple, but it's fun, it's entertaining, and it's like them kind of movies, like the classic action movies only seem to happen in the 80s and parts of the 90s, and now all seem to be but lost forever. But the 80s, in terms of like, martial arts movies and, especially like Hong Kong movies, and, look at films like Kickboxer, Bloodsport, etc., real heyday of sort of action movies. You had it a bit in the 90s as well. Now it's mainly we had a period where it was just Ip Man movies all the time, wasn't it? And now it seems the new thing is sort of the John Wick movies. But yeah, I just missed that like sort of classic time of like sort of the heyday of the 80s classics. But luckily we have movies like Kickboxer that help us remember what a magical time that was. I mean, this film has its faults. Boy, does it have its faults, but it's more than accomplishes by smashing out the park what it sets out to achieve. So we meet Eric Sloan, Alexio's character, and he is the world champion kickboxer, and he is a bit cocky, thinks he knows it all and is unstoppable, and has his kid brother Kurt Van Damme as his like trainer. A reporter at the very start of the movie asks him about Thailand, where kickboxing was invented, and right away the two brothers are off to Thailand. Like, he's just had a little bout, got off. This reporter asked him about Thailand, boom, we're off to Thailand, right, let's take on some kickboxers. Cue some very 80s music and jazzy outfits of them arriving in Bangkok. So the first thing Eric does is go to like a pussy bar, and Kurt just gives him this look like, he just gives him this look like, Eric, you and your crazy adventures. So he's just chasing women basically all the time. I think not. The story Van Damme was all. I think with this, he was also fight choreographer in this movie too. We find out Kurt lived with their mum in Europe and Eric lived with their dad in the States. And whilst training, and Van Damme lands some kick, Eric's like, "You won't get anywhere with that tip tap shit, or tap tap shit," he calls it. Kind of always putting him down a bit, and I actually quite like the tip tap shit. So Eric reckons it's all about power, proving he is a bit one track minded and thinks just being strong is the only key to being a good fighter. So Eric is going to fight Tong Po, and you have to love Kurt's spot when he's going to fight this guy, and you just have to love it when Kurt spots him in like his dressing room and training, and he's kicking this like support beam to the building like as hard as he can, proving what a tough fighter and opponent sort of that Eric is going to go up against. Just kicking this support beam and being like, crap. So, of course, he tries to warn Eric off, put him in, but him being the arrogant hothead he is, he doesn't want to listen. So when the fight begins, although getting some blows, Eric gets absolutely annihilated. Eric gets absolutely, completely destroyed. Knees, elbows, headbutts, you name it. The thing is, it's hard to have much sympathy for Eric. Not saying he deserved it. I'm not saying he deserves what happens to him, but he's so cocky and sort of like not bordering on sort of unlikable, because, like I say, he's just chasing skirt all the time. He's he thinks he's the best, and I suppose when you've had that many wins you would be thinking you're a bit unstoppable and everything like that, but the film is sort of it's in ways it's sort of about Eric's redemption as much as it is about Kurt getting vengeance. And I love how they dump Eric outside after the fight, and Van Damme is like, "Don't move." I'm pretty sure he can't move, even if he wanted to. I don't think he's going to be moving anywhere. He's just been absolutely had the crap beaten out of him. I don't think he's going to be moving. So Kurt just so happens to meet an American named Taylor, who just so happens to have a van as well to help take him to the hospital. So at the hospital, Kurt gets informed that his brother is sort of paralysed and there is nothing they can do. And Taylor says the only way to get back at Tong Po is inside the ring. Cue another 80s montage of Van Damme walking around Thailand, seeing the temples and streets, all the while reflecting on what has happened. Just having a moment like we all do sometimes, but it's got that, that cheesy but so cool at the same time, sort of that, cheesy 80s montage with the music and what he's doing, and he's reflecting and all this, and he's going over things in his mind about what his next move is going to be. The montage always happens in these kind of movies. He goes into a kickboxing gym but gets laughed out the door, saying he wants to fight Tong Po. Taylor finds him and says he knows a guy who might be able to train him as long as they go drinking first. He takes him to a strip joint first, and warns him about Tong Po's boss, Freddie Lee, and he gives him a bit of a backstory that he didn't help a guy in Nam, and that is why he's helping Kurt. So he meets Yan, played by Dennis Chan, and the first thing he does is ask him to go and get some groceries, where Van Damme starts laughing and playing with the children. He meets Yan's niece, and turns out Freddie Lee and his goons run like there's always a protection racket going on, isn't there? When there's like a innocent, harmless village of people just trying to get on, make the most out of their lives, enjoy their lives as best as possible, there's always somebody with those causing trouble, or with a protection racket or wanting money. So they demand money off of where she works. Van Damme takes out some of the thugs, so Taylor, being such an awesome guy, drops Kurt's things off at Zan's. And the training begins despite Lee saying he doesn't take students anymore. He's happy to train Kurt. Dennis Chan is perfect as the teacher and very much is the heart of the movie, and probably the best thing in it, to be fair. Dennis Chan is wonderful as his master, as his Sifu, as well as Tong Po is a very imitating villain, and it really reminds me of sort of, it's going to prove how geeky, nerdy I am, but it sort of reminds me of Bruce Irvin from the Tekken 2 game. I don't know if any of you remember Tekken 2 back in the day, but Bruce Irvin from Tekken 2 is very much it's almost like that's what Tekken 2 was sort of based on. Bruce from that was based on Tong Po. So Kurt and Xian's needs to compare stories and have a moment, and we keep getting shots of this eagle for some reason. We get to see Van Damme doing some nice footwork on some pads before having his legs pulled apart by Xian and his evil. He's got like evil medieval barbaric contraptions that he helps to sort of get Van Damme's legs as wide as possible so he can kick higher, kick stronger, and these kind of things. And at least they do have a brief shot of him visiting Eric to let us know he hasn't forgot about his brother completely while he's just training. And I swear the temple where they train is the same one where they're training, him and Zan. I swear it's the same one they use in the Mortal Kombat movie, the Paul Anderson, the original amazing film that is Mortal Kombat back in the day. I swear it's the same temple. I'm pretty sure it's the same. I could be completely wrong, but the Liu Kang's temple, the Temple of the Order of Light. I swear it's the same temple they use for that. So when Van Damme is doing these spin kicks as well, over Dennis Chan's head, you look just how close he's getting as well. He's getting so close to Dennis Chan's head. He's like doing these spin kicks, and it's literally inches, like nearly whacking it. And bearing in mind on No Retreat, No Surrender, where Van Damme worked on that movie, Corey Ian had to tell him to stop being, because he was making a lot of contact a lot of the time with some of the people he was fighting. He wasn't meant to be actually hitting them. And like I say, Dennis Chan is standing right below a Van Damme sort of roundhouse kick. I mean, I don't know if I would be... I mean, I know Van Damme's a very skilled martial artist, but I don't know if I'd be that confident to say, right, okay, because you stand to get a foot in the face. I mean, Dennis Chan, he must have been very brave. So Chan pushes Kurt to kick the crap out of this tree. Even though he collapses and his leg is basically a write-off, he is perfectly fine in the next shot. So the music ramps up, Kurt is getting faster and can split his legs more with no pain. Cut to Eric putting his hand up a nurse's skirt, and the nurse and Kurt and even the doctor are just like, again, Eric, you and your jokes, that's typical Eric, just manhandling the nurses. Even though he just basically did sexually assault somebody, but, whatever. So, Zan takes Kurt out drinking and gets him drunk on like a drink called Kiss of Death. Then we have the infamous Kickboxer dancing, which we all know, we've all seen. I think even people who haven't seen Kickboxer have seen the Van Damme dance in this, with Zan getting some of the guys in the bar to start on Kurt to see about his balance after telling them they aren't good fighters and their mothers have sex with mules, I think, if I recall, is what he says, sort of stirring it up so they'll sort of start on Van Damme. And I have to love how the bartender is just letting all this happen. He's not worried about anything. He's just letting them completely have a fight and a punch up in his bar. Just letting it, not worried about the damage. So Xian negotiates a deal to give Kurt a shot competing after beating these guys. At his first bout, Kurt wins very easily with a series of right kicks, and the crowd starts chanting Nuxu Kao, meaning white warrior. Eric gets let out of the hostel, and whilst training, Kurt begins to hear things at the temple, has another moment with Miley. Eric doesn't want Kurt to fight Tong Po, saying, I should have listened to you, and now it's your turn to listen to me. You said you just didn't listen to him. And he's like, I should have listened to you, now it's your turn to listen to me. But you didn't listen to him. Why should he listen to you? He wants Kurt to make his brother feel better. Just basically tells him, "I'm a better fighter than you ever were." So yeah, that's one way to make your brother feel better. He's like, "I'm a better fighter than you ever were," and probably could have phrased that a bit differently. Bearing in mind the guy's now actually paralysed at this point. He's like, "I'm a better fighter than you ever were." But yeah, so they get a message from Freddie Lee saying him and Tong Po will fight the old way by putting their hands in like resin and then broken glass. Freddie Lee goes to see like his master warlord, telling him that Kurt won't win and they will fight in the underground tomb. Which this underground tomb is very, very sort of browns and oranges sort of colour palette. Actually, when I think about it, I don't know if any of you have seen The Quest with Van Damme as well. I think it's the only film he's actually ever directed. That's sort of browns and oranges as well. Just thinking about the colour palette of the fighting. It's very sort of much like this film, but where they fight. A lot of oranges, a lot of browns in the colour palette. So Freddie wants $1 million to bet on Tong Po. So out of nowhere, My Lee gets kidnapped and being dragged to Tong Po, and it's implied that she actually gets raped as well. Not only that, Eric gets kidnapped, and the goons also stab Zhan's dog as well. I mean, this is so overkill at this point in the movie, as if like Kurt didn't have enough sort of motive and incentive already. Now they've thrown in like the girl he's liking has just got raped, his brother's been kidnapped, and they've just like committed animal cruelty and stabbed a dog. I say, as if he didn't have enough rage and anger going on as it is. I don't think we needed the rape subplot, as it just seems so thrown in there. Luckily, Taylor and Zhan take the dog to hospital, and the dog is saved. So we're now at the final fight. Freddy tells Kurt to go the distance and make the crowd happy. Meanwhile, Zhan randomly knows where Freddy is keeping his brother and goes to rescue him. Taylor comes along too and starts blowing up the place in his army gear and his shotgun cannon thing he has. Even have a guy getting halted from a very unpleasant area by like this metal hook as well, just for good measure. But yeah, Zhan just randomly knows where his brother is and just goes to get him. You know, they've already thought, I say, he's already been paralysed, and now what? They're gonna kill him as well, like if Kurt doesn't go the distance and make the fight last, so they get money from their bets. So I say, all the while this is happening, Kurt is getting beaten senseless, sort of like the end of Big Brawl actually, where Chan can't fight. It's like, if you remember my review from Big Brawl, like where, you know, when Jackie can't fight because Mako's been sort of kidnapped and he has to like last the rounds, and he's able eventually to fight properly once the person knows he is safe. The same thing sort of happens here. So Zhan, Eric and Taylor turn up, and now Kurt can let rip on Tong Po after he tells him he raped My Lee. Of course the music kicks in and both fighters look like they're wearing nothing but a small rag over their private areas. It doesn't look like they've got just a very skimpy piece of cloth just covering their down below. So it's a shame the end fight, though, it more than does its job, but so much of it is filmed in slow motion, unfortunately, which I'm sure was pretty cool at the time. I probably loved it at the time, but watching it again just recently, it's amazing how much that end fight is actually in slow motion. You know, just to add to the effect, I suppose, which it really didn't need. And I love how after beating Tong Po, he kicks Freddie Lee too, just around the, you know, just for good measure. So Kurt wins. The tune Never Surrender by I think Stan Bush kicks in at the end, Never Surrender. And it's probably about as an 80's as tune as you will ever get, that film and that song. But it's a classic Van Damme. I'm sure many of you have still seen Kickboxer, and it's one of these Van Dammes that everybody must see. It's an action film that everybody must see. There's a lot going in there, but as I say, the whole rape subplot I always thought was a bit unnecessary anyway. As I say, they'd already paralysed Eric, and then they kidnap him as well, you know, and all these things. But in like I said at the start review, in essence, it is actually sort of a kung fu movie at this guy who he's had an injustice happen to him and his family, and he finds somebody to train him and just become a better fighter, and he just has to go and take on the bad guy. Very simple movie, but a very, very classic like Van Damme movie nonetheless. And they sure as hell don't make these films like this anymore, like this much fun, and how cheesy it is and how 80's it is and how great the action is. But a great film, and great early Van Damme film. I will get round to reviewing more Van Dammes. I don't think I've done any Van Dammes yet, but a lot of classic Van Dammes to get through. More than likely we'll get onto Bloodsport next. Definitely some of his earlier films. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger, or you will miss all that heavenly glory.